I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Balara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you. Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Eric Nelson. Eric is an engineer and also a real estate investor. Eric, thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, Jason, my pleasure. It's an honor to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric, would you go ahead and kind of just give us a glimpse into your background, let us know your story, and then we'll dive into whatever topics seem to interest us.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm from Southwest Colorado. In fact, I live here now again. We kind of landed back here, but I went to school for engineering. So I studied civil engineering and kind of, like a lot of people, that was the route that I was kind of told to do, right? So go to college, get a job, do that stuff. And once I got that engineering job, I'll be honest, it was pretty dull. I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this forever. And I guess to bring it to real estate, I will say I was kind of thinking there's got to be other ways to make money. I mean, that came at a pretty young age. And so I'll kind of backtrack to real estate, but go forward. So then I decided to start my own company. And so I started an engineering company and have been pretty successful with that. Even though we're small, it's enjoyable to kind of be my own boss, right? And now things have ramped up real estate wise. And so to kind of go backwards, my brother and I bought a house actually in college, and it was just interesting. Basically, had the thought of like, why are we paying rent when we could buy a house and rent out the rooms, right? So we didn't even know what house hacking was. I didn't even know how to do the math. I just thought this would be a good idea. So we bought a house, and we did just that. We kind of house hacked. It had an empty basement, like an unfinished basement. So we kind of slowly flipped that house, and it was bad timing. Well, I guess you could say it's good timing because we bought it in, I think, 2007. And so even as two college students, we could get a loan on it, which is crazy. And then I think we sold in 2010. And to us, we were somewhat insulated as students. I mean, the market was just crushing people, and we were just going to school. Our friends were going to school. They had a little bit of money, paying rent, that type of thing. We had no money because we were in college, but it felt like, enough to pay rent and get some pizza. It was a lot of money. Anyway, so we sold it. And that was kind of my intro into real estate. So this actually kind of works. But like a lot of people slowly kind of it just took forever to get started. And again, I didn't know what I was doing. So we bought our single family house, my wife and I, and then we kind of same story. We just bought a rental, and we didn't know how to do the math. I just thought if you could cover the mortgage with the rent, that's great. Someone else is paying for this house. In reality, we're probably losing money because, month over month, there's expenses and all that stuff. So took a little bit of growing pains, I guess. And then we started realizing, okay, let's do the multifamily thing. If we can get a little bit bigger bang for our buck. So we bought a sixplex with some pretty unique financing, and the same thing, bought a threeplex with some very unique financing. And then we were just completely tapped out of cash. And so at that point, that's when I really was like, okay, how else can we make money at this? And I just happened to find bigger pockets. A friend kind of tipped me off. And like a lot of people, just really ran with it. I was like, oh my gosh, now I can see how to analyze this stuff, what it means to do the math. And then, went to a meetup actually and found my current mentor there. I was really lucky. And he kind of like pushed me more into syndication. That's kind of where I am now. So happy to chat about any and all of that for sure. But at the moment, that's where we are, is doing buying apartment buildings in Oklahoma and Texas mainly.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, let's. We kind of break it down. There's a lot of good stuff there. So you sort of started with house hacking almost by accident, I guess. The idea that we don't want to pay someone else rent, and I think that's realistically how a lot of people get started. It's kind of how I got started. I was like, I don't want to pay someone's rent. I'm going to buy this. Same time period, like inexpensive house. They'll give anyone a loan, like, and you can take on roommates and stuff and help pay for the mortgage. And so you kind of work through that. Now, I know you said you didn't, really know how to do the math and everything. And I think that it may be a good thing to touch on. So with with that, right, there's a lot with bigger pockets, especially there's a lot of calculators and things like that on how to know if you're truly making money uh, on a rental. Um, but I guess you could also argue, even if you're not specifically making cash flow, you're someone else is paying down your principal. You've got the tax benefits, but it just goes to point out how many different benefits there are within real estate. So I know you said, kind of maybe you were losing money on that house that you and your wife had bought as a rental, but realistically, I don't know if you ever calculated it. Do you know? Did you truly lose money, or did you just
Oh, I
not?
did. Yeah. No, we didn't lose money. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. Right. So I got a little lucky with the timing. I mean, the market's been going nuts for like, gosh, 10 years now. And so that one we bought in, I don't know, 17, 18, somewhere in there, held it for 2 years, and it was a true rental. And at the end of the day, we made 8 or 9%. And so I will say, annualize is not a great return given what I know now, but we absolutely made money. And you're totally right. I mean, had we held it, we would have made even more money. I mean, the market's gone pretty nuts even since then. So I completely agree with what you're saying. I mean, I have a friend who like it's his favorite thing to talk about principal buy down. I mean, because he has a different philosophy than me, and everyone, you got to do what's right for you. But he's always talking about he owns a commercial building. His renter pays $5,000 towards his principal every month, and he's like, that's just basically money in my pocket down the road. And then yeah, there's all the other benefits too. And I think depreciation. I mean, I don't want to get too far into this, but depreciation is a little bit of a double-edged sword, because at some point either you got to pay it back or anyway, but it is a benefit. I mean, because it is kind of like it is a tax deference. And so for at least the time being, you can defer some of that tax. And so if you say delay your tax until the sale, let's say it's 5, 6 years, that can be a lot of money that you could have put to use somewhere else. So I think that's the argument for that. And then, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there's not really, just because you're not cash flowing doesn't mean it's not a good investment. It's sometimes, again, I think there's better out there than just that, but I like your thinking.
Yeah, yeah. And it just, like you said, it totally depends on your strategy, right? I've heard people talk, big commercial investors, and I've heard them say like, all I care about is net worth. That's what I'm focused on, not cash flow. You hear other people say, I'm just focused on cash flow. Other people just, in it for the long term, they're just going to, buy down that principal. So there's so many different opportunities and avenues that you can take. You just have to kind of decide what you want to achieve. Cash flow is awesome. And there are markets where if you, really seek out the right deals, you can effectively get all of it for all intents and purposes. So it just points out the different benefits. So that when you moved on, you said you bought a sixplex and a threeplex, right? That was kind of your foray into multifamily.
Yeah, exactly. And truthfully, I mean, we were pretty short on cash. And so I was kind of looking, our market's kind of expensive. And I just kept thinking, there's got to be a way to get into this. And if you want, I'll dive into that story. I mean, it's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I was, my first son, I have two little boys now, I guess not so little, he's 4, but at the time he was a baby. And I was just pushing him down the street, and I saw this older gentleman sitting on the yard of the sixplex. And I said, hey, he was like putting a for rent sign in the yard. And I was like, oh, hey, it looks like you're, renting this place. You mind asking me, or do you mind if I ask what it was for rent? And he kind of gave me the rent price, and it was super low. I mean, I know the market really well. I was like, man, I didn't want to say anything. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, hey, I'm not actually looking to rent. I'm looking to buy. Would you be interested to sell? And he was like, yeah, I would. I think I would for the right price. And I said, okay, cool. Let me give you my number and let's connect later. Give me a shout and think on your number. That's kind of where I left it, and then because I didn't want to like just dive in his face about all this stuff. And so I was thinking he might own this outright, was kind of back of my mind. Right. So he called me, we started talking, he gave me a number. It was kind of high for the market, and I think he knew that. I said, okay, well, that's potentially possible. Do you owe any on the building? He goes, no, I inherited it. And I said, okay, cool. Would you consider owner financing? He's like, yeah, I kind of heard about that. can you tell me what it is? I mean, that's kind of how the conversation went. And so I described, well, it's sort of like this. I mean, sort of like the bank, and then we can actually negotiate terms just between us. We can find something that works. And I could tell immediately, and I'll just tell you, it was $1 million. It was $1 million for the sixplex. And I could tell he was focused on that number. And I said, well, okay, that's a little high for the market. But if you'll owner finance it at a really low down payment and a 40-year amortization, I can make that work. And for him, he had never heard of that word. He didn't even know what amortization was. He's like, well, what's my monthly payment? And because his rents were so low, he could get more of a monthly payment from me than he could from his current rents. And if you think about that in his position, he's like, sweet, I don't have to do all this stuff. And the other thing I'll mention is there was an empty unit that was just jammed with stuff. He was only renting 5 of the 6. So I knew immediately we could clean it out, clean it up, and get it rented. And so I was like, cool, I'll pay the $1 million. And I paid 35,000 down. So he took a 3.5% down payment. His attorney was like kind of mad at me, actually. He's like, can't believe you're going to do this to the guy. And I said, yeah, it's a little bit of a risk, but worst case scenario, he gets the property back, right? I don't think it's a bad gig, even in a kind of risky situation as a lender. And he's owned the place forever. So it's like, I don't know. Anyway, so it worked out really, really well. Took over the property and we did just that. We cleaned up the 6th unit, and as every unit turned, we got it back up to market, and we were making pretty good cash flow. We recently sold it, only really because it was a bit of a headache. I mean, there's no other way to say it, but it was a great learning experience. And actually, when we sold the property, he carried that note on. So it was easy to kind of sell it too, because the next buyer was like, oh, I'll just continue the owner finance deal. And the seller was like, great. Yeah, I love this monthly payment thing. So it's kind of a win-win-win. So it all kind of worked out, but it was kind of fun to just literally be walking on the street and ask the questions. And, tell the full story. I do that a lot, even now. I still ask people if they want to sell, if they have a rent sign out. And so I get a lot of no's, but occasionally I get a yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's the trick, right? You need to talk to everybody about what you're trying to do. Even as people talk about driving for dollars all the time. You're, walking your kids for dollars. That's a same thing. Basically, if you can find things in your neighborhood, that's fantastic. So I like it. I like the, sort of creative owner financing. I think, you also hear people talk about, when you're in a negotiation, you can sort of say your price, my terms, or vice versa, right? So, and that's exactly what you did. So they're happy, you're happy. It doesn't have to be one person winning, the negotiation. It doesn't have to be a beat down. It doesn't have to be anything like that. It just, you're solving their need, they're solving your need, and everybody wins. So that's fantastic. And did you do the same thing sort of with that 3 unit?
Did, yeah. And that's actually kind of cool. Basically the exact same story. I was walking down the street, older woman, she's awesome. Same story. And I basically kind of did the same routine where I saw the for rent sign. I said, hey, would you sell it? And she was a little bit more, I guess, savvy. I mean, she's like, yeah, I would owner finance it for the right, cost, terms, all that stuff. But the front house was pretty nice. And then there's a duplex in the back. And what we ended up doing was moving into that house, and we still live there. So we love our neighbors. We have really good tenants. We didn't at first, but that's, the kind of the growing pains, right? But she owner financed it for us. Same story. She went a little bit more down, of course, but so that was our primary residence. And when we moved, it was pretty good timing because our previous house we'd lived in for just over 2 years. So we ended up actually selling that previous one, of course, pretty much tax-free profits. And so that's another, thing I'm sure your listeners know. We lived in it for 2 years and we could actually end up selling it. And so it was really, really good timing all around. And we still live there. So we have 2 renters that offset our mortgage, and it's not really like a true triplex. I mean, it doesn't like live that way. It's kind of a gym for sure. And we still love being there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good point that you brought up as far as, avoiding capital gains tax on a primary residence sale. So if the rule is if you live there 2 out of the 5 previous years, then basically you can sell without having to pay capital gains tax up to, I want to say it's 250,000 for a single person and 500,000 for married couple. So you've got that, sort of built-in cushion of essentially tax-free money if you've lived in it. So you can, doesn't have to be the first 2 years. It doesn't have to be the last 2 years, just 2 out of the 5 previous years. So that's awesome to take advantage of that. So then you said you now have sort of moved into the syndication space. How did that work? Kind of what are you working on there?
Yeah. So again, we kind of lucked into it. So we, at that point, I mean, we were truly out of money. It was like, just, I wanted to invest more. I really thought maybe I could find some more kind of low down payment options. It's just, how it goes. It's a challenge, right? Especially if you're trying to do that, because it's really, really challenging. So I went to a meetup and found a couple people doing kind of similar stuff. It was really cool to meet some local people in the same world. And my current coach and mentor was running the meetup. And so I just went a couple times and we connected, and I said, hey, do you need help running this thing? There's not a lot to it, but I'm happy to help logistics or, step in if you're out of town or whatever. And he's like, yeah, sure, that'd be great. So we kind of got a little bit of a connection there, and we'd meet up for lunch or something. And he was like, I'm listening to your story and you just need to partner. It's like, you have the knowledge, what you're doing. Why aren't you partnering with somebody? And to be completely honest, it's like completely limiting mindset. I was just like, I don't really want to partner with someone. And so it took him some kind of jabbing for months, really. He's like, you just got to find someone who's willing to partner with you and has some capital. And so really the next thing from there was doing just that. I just finally said, okay, fine, let's do this. So I started looking for some deals out of state at that point, because I knew the cash flow would be better. And I could find, a little bit more affordable deals. So I found an 8-plex in Texas, and then I found a partner basically from the deal. And so it might've been a little bit backwards. I mean, it worked well because I'd kind of been putting some feelers out, found a really good deal, reached out to a guy who I knew had some cash. And I said, hey, if you partner with me on this, I'll do basically everything. I want you to be part of it. I want you to learn. And that was kind of his gig. He's like, yeah, great. I'll do all the cash. I just want to be a part of the meetings. I want to learn the process. It's a really great partnership. And I brought my brother in as well. So there's 3 partners on that deal, and it worked. It's still working really well. We're still in that property, doing great. And so then again, it was like, okay, what's sort of the next step here? And that's when Jens was telling me about syndication. And again, it was just kind of this thing where I thought, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of investors to answer to. I mean, all this stuff that's just like limiting and negative. So finally, I kind of started researching it more, looking into it more. I was like, okay, actually, this actually could work. And it does seem pretty cool. And I think one thing that kind of shifted in my mind too is I had this vision that you're like taking people's money. In fact, one person I've talked to early on is like, oh, well, you're just using other people's money to make you money. And he kind of said it like that. And it hit me hard. And the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? That's not true at all. Actually, you're giving someone an opportunity that most people don't really have the opportunity to invest totally passively in real estate with someone who is, super knowledgeable about the space. You're basically tapping into an expert and you don't have to do anything. And so it's actually the opposite. You're providing this really cool opportunity. And so it's kind of seen as maybe a negative way. So after I had a little more research and kind of had that mindset shift, I just went for it. And I said, okay, let's start figuring out how to do it. In my opinion, the number one thing I needed to do was get educated. So I listened to a billion podcasts. I read all the books, just kind of went for it education wise. And then I started, okay, let's start a website, get the social media stuff going, all that kind of leads into syndication. And so at this point now we have one deal that I can talk about because it's closing next week. And then one more kind of in the works. Probably shouldn't talk too much about it, but anyway, it's kind of like, it feels like it's rolling a little bit.
Don't get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, exactly.
Share generally, I guess, whatever you like, but don't get I know there's the SEC is a tricky.
Yeah, they're probably listening on occasion. Yeah. So I won't go into detail on that one, but I'm happy to talk about the first one. Again, it's closing before this will be released.
All right, let's talk about it then. That sounds great.
Cool. Yeah. So it's 48 units in Tulsa. And I just really love that market. I love the metrics there. We found a really kind of a cool one. It's like a B B minus maybe property in an A plus neighborhood. And it's kind of a cool one for our first one because the current manager's in place and she's amazing. And actually that's part of the reason we got the deal, is because part of our LOI, we said, hey, we just want to keep her in place. And the seller's like, that's part of my thing, is I love her so much, she deserves to stay. And so we actually ended up winning the deal partially just because of the manager. And what's cool too is she actually ended up investing in the deal, which actually was really a cool thing, but it was also helpful to tell other people, say, hey, the manager believes in this enough to jump in as well. So that was kind of fun. I mean, it's a good size for us. She can split payroll because it's kind of that weird medium size, right? And so she already has that in place. And so pretty excited about that one for sure.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And I think having the manager invested in it, I mean, that's really strong alignment of interests, right? Like now everybody who matters really wants this property to perform well. So that's fantastic. How did you find that deal?
So that was I don't know if it quite hit the market yet. And so this is probably really good info for people trying to get into the syndication space. Is we traveled there, myself and my partner. There's 4 of us now, but at the time there's 2 of us. We were just traveling there about every other month, just to show face, talk to the brokers, look at properties, just say, hey, we're serious about this. We're serious buyers. We're ready to roll. And I think that's hugely important, because I don't think people put enough weight on showing your face. Go to dinner with someone, go to coffee with someone, just take the time to go out there and drive around, learn the market best you can, talk to as many brokers as you can. And so that's really where it came from, was kind of broker relationship. And I think, I mentioned we won the deal because of the manager. I think it was partially, the broker had a little bit to do with it. So I can't recall if it hit the market or not. It was about to. And so we were probably one of, I'm guessing, 8 groups or so to have a look at it. And we loved it. I mean, I think we saw what a lot of people saw, but I think other people passed because of the size. There's plenty of people out there who want 80 plus, or some people say 100 plus. We weren't scared of the under 50 because we knew how the payroll worked. And so just found it mostly from a broker relation.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And those are all great points. I mean, in terms of the importance of making those relationships and actually getting out there and sort of face-to-face meetings. So that's great. That's great. I won't pry into it too much just because you haven't closed yet. I don't want to, get you in trouble if things get held up or something like that. But no, that's great. And congratulations. I'm excited for you to get that closed soon. So that'll be awesome. Why don't we, sort of on that note, let's transition to the questions that I like to ask everybody, each guest on the podcast. The first one is related to the name of the show, being Know Your Why. So Eric, what is your why? What motivates you, drives you to do this and be successful? You've got a successful engineering business. What's kind of pushing you to go even further with real estate?
Yeah, I mean, the kind of simple answer is I have 2 kids, that one's 4 and one's 2, and my wife. I just want to spend more time with them. So the why would be kind of them, but ultimately I'm trying to buy back time. And so my ultimate driver is, the sooner I can have more time with them, the better off. That's the goal, right? So I'm not terribly motivated by money, if I'm being totally honest. I think most people want a little bit more than they have, or a lot of it more. I would rather have more time. And so my true driver is just having time with my family, to travel, be there for every game, every, sports thing, whatever it is. I try to do that now, but I want even more of it. So I guess I'm a little bit greedy about time. So that's really the ultimate driver.
I 100% agree. That is exactly my motivation as well. I just want more time to be able to, sort of be there and not miss things. So totally understand. All right. Second question. Tell me something about yourself, maybe that isn't common knowledge. Special hobby or a special skill. I mean, a hobby, something that maybe people don't know about you.
Oh, very cool. It's not really a skill, but my wife and I guess it's 6 years ago. Wow. We took a year off. So we actually saved up a bunch of money, took a year off of work, got in an 80s Toyota like pickup truck thing and drove to the bottom of South America. And the van life thing now is super cool, but this is kind of before that, and before before there was the resources, and so it's quite an adventure. And I wouldn't belittle it now. I mean, it's an adventure anyway. But so yeah, we took the time to like just be us before kids, travel, experience other cultures, and took a year to drive from Colorado to the bottom of South America, and it was amazing. I mean, some days were tough, some days were amazing, but it was a pretty unique ride for sure.
Yeah, I bet that's fantastic. I bet a lot of great memories and pictures that from from
I
that.
know, that's funny. Like our house still, actually, there's a picture that we went and saw the sunrise at this picture behind me. For those of you watching on YouTube, but
That's amazing.
yeah,
That's amazing. A trip. We've talked about doing something like that, not necessarily South America, but basically just taking time off and getting in an RV with the kids and driving around the US and just like seeing the things that you know are there, but you don't really take advantage of them because life gets in the way. But yeah, it goes back to that whole time thing. So um where how can people reach out to you when they hear this? What's the best way to kind of find you out there in the world?
yeah, absolutely. I think it kind of all lives on the website. So if you go to wildoakcapital.com, you'll find my podcast, which is called The Real Estate Mindset. So on my show, I talk about mindset stuff. And so I think it really ties in really similarly with yours is, what's the mindset behind the drive, and what do you going for, right? And so I don't want to dive into my podcast too much. I just want to mention it because it's kind of on a similar track.
Yeah.
One thing I think I talked about, like mindset shift, was like, I really need to learn how to partner, trust other people. And it turns out that in doing that, you just propel so much faster, so much farther with other people, especially if you can find people with complementary skills. And so that's really what I love to talk about. So you can find me on wildoakcapital.com, or Real Estate Mindset Podcast is out there on all the channels too. But basically, you can reach out through that. And my email is eric@wildoakcapital.com.
Okay, awesome. And then final question, Eric, what would you give as a piece of advice to people, that are maybe a little bit behind in their journey from you? What would you tell them to help inspire them?
Yeah, I think, it's probably a little cliche, but have some patience. I will say I kind of like stressed myself pretty heavy first starting out, because I'm the type of person that wants to go pretty fast. I was like, oh, I love the syndication thing. It's so cool. Like, let me get there. And I really had to just kind of take it one step at a time. And the other thing I'll say is just like, with that patience, is just enjoy the journey. I mean, there's always another step. That's what's kind of cool in a way about real estate, is like, you get your website done. Well, then start a podcast, and you get your podcast done. Well, then start, Syndication Pro. Well, then, it's like, it's always like that. And then even if you do that, then you start getting into the realms of like talking about a fund, talking about, I mean, it's bottomless, right? So the main piece of advice I would say is have some patience. It really does take time. It really does take, it'd be interesting actually to do like a survey of people who are doing it now. How long did it take when you first had the idea of syndication till you closed on your first deal?
Yeah.
I would argue most of the time it's a year, maybe more. And so that's kind of coming back to the tip would be just have some patience, and maybe more important than that is just enjoy the journey, because there's a long way to go, and there's not really an end in sight. It's more just like the stepping stones. And if you're there, then that's kind of where you're supposed to be. So I think the tip would be just enjoy it, and don't be too much in a rush.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I always forget who says it, but there's a quote, something to the effect of you overestimate what you can get done in a year, but you greatly underestimate what you can do in 10 years or something. So it's a matter of being patient, as you said, and then you will, with time, the velocity will pick up, right? You'll as you start to get better and better at it, you have systems in place now. Finding those deals is easier, closing those deals is easier. It just becomes, sort of more of a well-oiled machine, and takes less and less of your, kind of grinding, I guess is probably the way I would put it. But yeah, I love that. I love that piece of advice.
Yeah. Can I give one more?
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things I would say is, and you mentioned this as well, is start telling people what you're doing. Even if you have no idea what you're doing, start telling people what you're looking to do. If you're really serious about this business, one thing that everyone said, and it rings true is capital raising is difficult. And lots of people will say, yeah, I'd be interested. And that's what they mean. They'd be interested to look. They're not necessarily interested in investing, right? So the more you can build your investor base, the better off you'll be. And if I think it just starts with telling people, here's what I'm up to, here's what I'm doing. I think someone mentioned what they did was they said they'll either have coffee or breakfast or something or beer with someone 2 times a week for the first 2 years. And if you think about it, that's just doing that, which is not a huge commitment. That's 100 people a year. So after 2 years, you've already personally touched 200 people. And you probably want to circle back. But I thought it was kind of a cool concept to just like start telling people you know. And that kind of comes along with the patience thing, is just start building it. Sooner you can tell people, the better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, putting some sort of strategy, that's, coffee with someone twice a week, that's putting something in place where you're actually reaching out to investors before you ever have a deal, before you, really need that capital, because when it comes time, that time goes by really fast.
Yeah, it becomes crunch time, right? So like you've got this PSA and then the closing is a month away, and then it's, you're watching the capital raise and it's like, oh gosh, a long way to go.
What's encouraging though is to see the people that have been doing it for a long time and they're like, I don't even have to try to raise capital anymore. Like investors come to me and like, okay, that's good to know that that's eventually where you can get. So yeah, it is all about patience and not thinking that you're going to be in that position right off the bat, right? It's not going to come easy immediately. So good stuff. Good. All good advice. Well, Eric, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. I appreciate you sharing your story. I think it was great. A lot of really good tips for people that I think are very actionable. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, no, my honor. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, with that, we will take off. All right, have a good day, everyone.
I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Balara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you.